find us when we come.
Awake and ready.
And when he asks us to dedicate ourselves to him ever more perfectly, how will he find us then?
Awake and ready.
Let's pray together. Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
friend, beloved God,
friend, beloved God,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
our beloved Guru Deva,
our beloved Gurudeva,
Paramahansa Yogananda,
Paramahansa Yogananda,
saints of all religions,
saints of all religions,
we humbly bow before all of you.
we humbly bow before all of you.
Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
help us to attune ourselves
help us to attune ourselves
ever more perfectly
ever more perfectly
to your divine presence within.
to your divine presence within.
Help us to remember always
Help us to remember always
to look for the light and to turn towards it.
to look for the light as we turn towards it.
Bring us home.
Bring us home.
Oh, please.
Please.
Amen. Please.
Home is a green hill, home is a wind, blowing gay trail far, far away. Home is the knowledge heaven is near. Home's the end of the fray. Home is my heart's land, home's where I am. Nothing can dim the light of my soul. Home is forever, home is today. Home's a heart that is whole. Often I dream that life is a play, laughter forever and skies never gray. But when I'm silent, free from all care, I discover my home's everywhere. Home is a green hill, home is a wind, blowing betrayal far, far away. Home is the knowledge heaven is near. Home's the end of the
Remaining in an inward state, let's listen to these words on moral vigor by Swami Kriyananda. Lack of moral vigor saps the will and makes the intellect sponge-like, ready to absorb the prevalent opinion of the times. People with good intellects often suffer from the Hamlet complex, the inability to come to any decision or to commit oneself to anything. They justify their indecision by saying, I want to be fair to all sides. But even an imperfect action is better than no action at all. When you believe in something, stand by it. When you believe in someone, stand by him. Such loyal self-commitment is a higher law than seeing all sides. Energy is needed to accomplish anything in life. With moral vigor, all things are possible. But without it, the end of every act is failure. Affirming together, both aloud Getting quieter and quieter until we're holding it with deep concentration silently at the point between the eyebrows. Let's affirm. The decisions that I make in life come from within myself.
The decisions that I make in life come from within myself.
From my sense for what is right.
From my sense of what is right.
I am committed to the truth.
I am committed to the truth.
And to channeling it outward to the world.
And to channeling it outward to the world.
More softly now. The decisions that I make in life come from within myself.
The decisions that I make in life come from within myself.
From my sense for what is right.
From my sense of what is right.
I am committed to the truth.
I am committed to the truth.
And to channeling it outward to the world.
And to channeling it outward to the world.
More quietly still, the decisions that I make in life come from within myself. From my sense for what is right. I am committed to the truth. And to channeling it outward to the world. In a soft whisper now, the decisions that I make in life come from within myself. From my sense for what is right. I am committed to the truth. And to channeling it outward to the world. Silently now, with deep concentration at the point between the eyebrows. The decisions that I make in life come from within myself. From my sense for what is right. I am committed to the truth. And to channeling it outward to the world. Silently listening to this prayer. Divine Mother, with every action of my will, let me express thy divine vitality, thy truth, thy perfection. Let me live to serve thee alone, or else die in the attempt. Om. Peace.
Good morning, friends.
Good morning.
And we want to thank Shanti and Lakshmi. Those who don't know, Shanti is the spiritual director from Ananda, Palo Alto. And Lakshmi serves in Palo Alto as well at the Ananda community there. And we're coming on this is kind of the cherry on top of this deeply inspiring weekend we've had on Kriya Yoga. With an initiation retreat day yesterday and programs in Thousand Oaks and the South Bay. So it's been a deep joy to have Shanti and Lakshmi with us. I'm going to share from Yogananda's book of prayer demands called Whispers from Eternity. If you haven't heard of this book, it's an absolute gem. And this one is called Flood Me with Thy Omnipresent Love. O fountain of love, flood the lowlands of our love for home and family with thy omnipresent love. O mighty source of all our rivers of desire, teach us not to cut ourselves off from thee, hunting on dry sands of sense satisfaction. Love is our soul's birthright. We demand now that all the rivers of our cravings be redirected through valleys of humility, eager self-sacrifice, and concern for others until, reinforced by thy torrential blessings, they merge in the ocean of all fulfillment in thee. Bless us, that the rivulets of our sympathy, affection, and love lose not themselves in the sands of dreary selfishness. Let the little, lonely, separately moving streamlets of our love, which come from thee, merge at last in the vastness of thy perfect love.
This week's reading from Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda, is week 42, the promise of the scriptures. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 15, we read the famous parable of the prodigal son. Jesus tells of a man who took the wealth bestowed on him by his father and squandered it in foreign lands, where he fell into evil ways. At last, repentant, he returns to his father's home. When the father saw him, he was, Jesus tells us, moved with compassion, and ran and fell upon his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee. I am no longer worthy of being called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Fetch quickly the best robe and put it on him, and give him a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and bring out the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and make merry. Because this my son was dead, and he has come to life again. He was lost and is found. And they began to make merry. Small-hearted human beings, identified as they are with their little egos, have exaggerated importance to any slight they receive from others. Thus they imagine God, like them, to be petty, unpardoning, and vindictive. In God's eyes, however, when human beings go astray, there is nothing to forgive. All of us are aspects only of his own self. He who made us resides in us. He is not far away. He is not far away from us, in some far-off heaven. His call to us always is to return to our home within. The way of return is described in the Bhagavad Gita in the sixth chapter. Supreme blessedness is the yogi who has completely calmed his mind, controlled his ego-active tendencies, rajas, and purged himself of desire, thereby attaining oneness with Brahma, the infinite spirit. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Good morning, everyone. So I was just looking around for the clock. And then somebody would have to come and get me. This reading that we have this morning is, by almost everyone's account, one of the most touching, deeply touching and moving stories in the Bible. And always for me, maybe because Yogananda so often referred to Divine Mother, but this is the Father, and we just feel such love, such extraordinary love and total acceptance in this story. So it's always, I always love getting here every year, right at this time. Swamiji doesn't tell the whole story in this little reading, so I just want to stretch it out a little bit for us. This parable, the prodigal son, has so many deep, this allegory, I should say, has so many, so much deep meaning in it, so much symbolism. So there's two sons, and one of the sons goes to the father and says, I want you to divide up your profits right now and give me my half of whatever would come to me at some point. Give it to me now. And so the father does, and he gives the son his half of his inheritance. And the son takes it, and in the Bible it says, depending on the interpretation that you read or the edition that you're reading, he went off to foreign lands, and he lived either riotously or loosely. Now we can just conjure up whatever image we want of what riotous living might have meant, but it wasn't good. He squandered his wealth, is really what happened. He spent his money very quickly, and then he realized he needed to work. So he finds a friend, he asks for a job. The friend sends him to his farm and gives him a job feeding the pigs. And in the meantime, a famine breaks out in the land. And so the son, who is given an enormous amount of wealth, now has no money and he has no food. And in the Bible it says he found himself longing to eat the food that he was feeding the pigs, but no one offered it to him. And then the thought comes to him, there are people working for my father who have all the bread and all the food they need, and I'm here feeding the pigs and I'm starving. And he makes this plan, as Lakshmi then read, that he will go home and say to his father, just prostrate himself at his father's feet and say, I've sinned against you, I've sinned against God, I'm not worthy of anything. Can you just hire me on as a hand? Now, already we see what's going on in the story. We can see what Jesus is telling us. The son leaving his father, going into the foreign land, which really means a land away from God, and that there's a famine, which means he's bereft of God's love, of nourishment for his soul, which is what he's hungry for, and he's feeding the pigs, which in this story, Jesus likes to use this analogy of pigs somehow, but it works. That he's feeding the pigs, which means all of the demands of our ego. You know, that's what's pulling on him and keeping him out. And then he begins to realize his hunger, and he has the realization, really, wait a minute, I just left everything, and I'm out here. Nothing's taking care of the deepest needs that I have. But he doesn't say to himself, my father's just going to love me and accept me. I'm going to say here parenthetically, I imagine this story sounding pretty familiar to many of us, because I hear it so often, and I felt it myself, and I'm going to share a personal story after this extraordinary sense of unworthiness in front of God. And that's what happens here. The son's going to go home, and he's planning a speech the whole way home. I know I'm horrible. There's no reason why you would give me anything. I don't deserve anything. Let me just work for a piece of bread. But what happens, which is where Swamiji puts the emphasis in this reading today, is the father sees him from far away. He sees him coming, and he's like, my son is coming home. And he calls everyone, and he says, get the finest robe, and get a beautiful ring for him. And look, he has no shoes. Let's put sandals on his feet, and kill the most fattened calf. Let's make a feast to welcome my son home. And the son comes, and he's trying to tell his story to the father, and the father will just have none of it. He says he just grabbed him, he was kissing his neck. It's just so utterly beautiful. You know, I was thinking when I was just telling Dharma Devi this morning, I started to cry so many times reading this story last night and this morning. And I thought, you know, you really can't get up there and cry. It's not going to be one. But it just even right to there, if we let ourselves feel it, the nature of unconditional love. I've thought so often over these many years of, you know, just having a great good karma to be able to speak and teach and be with so many people in so many beautiful ways. One of the questions that comes from men most often, but can you tell me how to develop devotion? Can you explain to me how to open my heart? I hear it all the time. And the other is, what does it mean, God is love? what does it mean? I mean, I asked myself that question for years and years. But if you just allow yourselves to read this story over and over, and you feel God's love, suddenly you are out of your head. You are into your heart. And one cannot help but feel close to God. There's no defined way. It wouldn't matter how many words somebody said to any of us about how to develop devotion. We can give hints, and we've had our own, of course, trials, and then that God is love, and you have an experience of it. You feel the deep love of the Father for the Son, and then you don't ask the question anymore. I was just thinking this morning, anytime I feel it all out of my heart, I'm just going to read this story. I just love this story. Many years ago now, this is many years ago, I separated from my husband, a man who I had been with for, 15 to 17 years. I was trying to remember today how long we were together. He was a very great soul, and we had a magnificent relationship. We were deep friends. We had a lot of fun. We were great lovers in the broadest sense of the word. And to this day, I don't know why, and that's the truth. I don't know why, but I had to separate from him. It makes no sense. I just have learned to trust. But I left him, and it was devastating. It was a big deal for many reasons, not just between Barry and I, but we were playing a rather sizable role throughout the peninsula. And everybody had us as the couple we were going to be. And then I left. It was powerful. For 2 years, this is the truth, if not hyperbole, I sat at my altar twice a day, and I promised God that I would never let myself be happy until I knew Barry was happy. Twice a day for 2 solid years. I said, I promise you. I was talking to God. I mean, I think about it now. I will not I'm going to do what's right here. I'll never let myself feel happiness until he does. And one day, as clear as a bell, I mean, it wasn't quite a voice, but like that, I hear Shanti Ma, just like this. Do you think this is what I want from you? Repeat it. Do you think this is what I want from you? And then there was this long pause. You know what it's like when you hear truth. It just cuts through everything. I mean, I suddenly was there. I felt both like an utter fool, and I felt so loved. And he said to me, I want your love because I had done this to my heart. You know, if you're not going to let yourself feel happiness or love, we have just separated ourselves from the divine. It was just the craziest thing, but there you have it. You know, my own version of, I'll go home and I'll lay myself at the feet of the Father and tell him how awful I am over and over and over. And really, by the grace of God, he doesn't let us stay there. Now, you know, when I thought about it later, many years later, I thought to myself, do we really think that he's surprised by our delusions or that kind of craziness? He created delusion. He's in charge of it. Of course he knows we're going to do this. And he will be there again and again to remind us, you are eternally and in all ways, under all circumstances, my child. Whatever's happening out in your world, out in that world, nothing's changed. Ananda says in a very beautiful writing of his when he's talking about prayer, he says, let me just see if I can get this right. your realities, I'm losing the first line of it, which I really want to share with you. Well, I'm going to have to paraphrase it, which I hate to do with Master because that man is away with words. But he basically says that the mistakes you make, the way you behave, can be changeable, but you are not. They can be impermanent, but you are not. You are now and forever part of a changeless, eternal reality, which is that I manifested you. I am you. You are me. And no matter what you think when you're out in the world making mistakes or just taking a wrong turn and you find yourself on a detour that can last for a very long time, I have not forgotten at all. And this is what Jesus says to us in this reading. He says, God doesn't forget. God says, my son was lost, and now he's found. He's home. This is perfect. There's nothing to talk about here. There's nothing we need to get clear, that we can always, always just turn around. In fact, it's what we're meant to do. We have to keep reminding ourselves wherever we are, because of course we're going to get lost. It's the nature of the human condition. It will happen. And it's supposed to happen because it helps us get stronger and stronger and keep honing the direction of our heart and how to find our way home. All we need to do is keep looking for the light. This decision that I'm making, does it make me feel bigger, lighter, more peaceful, more calm? Oops, if it doesn't, wrong direction. There's a man who now runs our center in Bangalore. Maybe some of you know him, Haridas. Haridas is so good with words. He always comes up with, he's quoted for many reasons, but at this time, I don't even know what the context was, but he said basically, we all need to be spy dogs. What do spy dogs mean? Solving problems in the direction of God. And it's true. And we have to just keep checking in with ourselves. Is this mood that I'm in? Is this thought about myself? Is this judgment of somebody else? Do I feel better when I do that? Or do I feel contracted? That's what we always have to do, is head in that direction. And make no mistake about it, God does not care how many times we fall. He doesn't care how many times we trip, how many mistakes we make. Not at all. As I said, he sort of set it up. He pretty much had everything to do with the Maya, the delusion, everything that calls on us and tugs on us. He doesn't care. The main plot of the story is not the fall. It's not in the trip. It's in the rising back up. That's what he's looking for. That's what he wants. That's what makes us feel better. You know, we see this. You know, we're coming up on Christmas, and we, of course, tell this same magnificent story every year. And I heard this verse from Asha years ago, but it's so right. You look at a lot of Christian teaching and a lot of Catholic teaching, and they make a very big deal about the crucifixion. And of course, it is a pretty big deal. I mean, I'm not writing it off. It's a big deal. But for us, as self-realizationists, the much bigger deal is in the resurrection. I mean, it's extraordinary what Christ did on the cross. But that we get to see, and Master came in some ways to show us this. This was part of the new dispensation. Look at this. All that you thought was but lightness is but dark. That body that you thought was the beginning and the end, no problem. Christ will just come back in 3 days. These great masters, they can resurrect themselves. So it is in the rising up. This is what Master wants us to take notice of. Again, we can trip. So we're down. So we're down for the count. So we feel like a fool. You know, when Swamiji had to give a talk, you've all read this story probably in the that Master just said to him, or not Master Bernard, I think one of the other monks came to him, said, Master wants you to go down to San Diego and give the talk tomorrow. Swamiji said, you're kidding. They're waiting. They haven't seen Master in months, it was. They're going to get me? And Bernard says, yeah, that's what Master wants. He didn't allow them to be too emotional about it. But then Swamiji said to himself, which was such a lesson for me, what's the worst thing that can happen? They'll think I'm a fool. I'll say something silly. And he was so at ease about it. He was so, when I read that, when I heard him tell that story, how many times. But it was really rather extraordinary. So what? So we make a fool out of ourselves. So we thought we needed that money, and we wasted it. So what if we lived riotously? You know, there's that beautiful story in Autobiography of a Yogi, where Master Yogananda goes to his guru, Sri Yukteswar. He even says later, he sort of says, I'm not trying to defend myself in AY, he says, but I had only been with him for 6 months. But many people know the story, that he said to Sri Yukteswar, will you give me your blessings to go into the Himalaya, because I need to have an experience of cosmic consciousness. Here he is with this extraordinary master. Give me your blessings. At first, Sri Yukteswar says to him, you know, there are many hillmen living in the Himalayas. They're not having the experiences of God. Maybe you want to think about that experience with a realized being, he was saying, just casually. And then Master said, no, I know I need to go. I know I do. Just like the prodigal son, exactly like the prodigal son. He wasn't going to go off and live riotously, but some such away from this great avatar. And so Sri Yukteswar just doesn't answer. I don't have Master's words right in my mind, but he very cutely says, so I very conveniently took that as his agreement, which we all do. We can find ourselves in many ways in all these stories. So he goes off, and he has all these experiences. Finally with Ram Gopal, who's the sleepless saint. That's what a lot of this story is about. And Ram Gopal says, your guru is not in the stone here. You're not going to find him there. You go home, you have a guru at home. And Yogananda goes back, and he walks in sheepishly, and he says to Sri Yukteswar, Master, I'm home. And what does Sri Yukteswar do? He says, come, let's make some food. Just like that. Let's make a meal. It's so beautiful. And Yogananda looks at him and says, aren't you mad at me? I just walked out on all of my duties. Never mind. I walked away from God himself and went out searching. And Sri Yukteswar says, you know, I have no expectations really of you or anything. My happiness is not hooked onto anything that you can do or not do. So I would never be bothered by that. He says it much more articulately. But it's so beautiful when Yogananda walks away and walks out of there. He has this phrase where he says, I was struck by the incompressible vastness of cosmic love. Isn't that beautiful? The incompressible vastness of cosmic love. It's just so beautiful in 4 words that he says that. And that's what we need to remember. There is no such thing as not being worthy of God's love. There is nothing that any of us can do. Swamiji says whatever we've seen that anybody else has done, we've either already done it or we still have to do it. Anything. That's just frightening to think of it. But that means we've done some pretty awful stuff, and yet here we are, by the grace of God, sitting in an Ananda temple, having been called by these beautiful masters who love us unconditionally, endlessly. And here's the recipe. God, that presence, that super consciousness, finds it absolutely irresistible when we give him our love. It's the law. It's really the divine law. It's inexpressible in that there's no way to express it in words, but it is true. I know this. These are not just what we hear. We offer God our love because he is love. It's an energetic, vibrational, cosmic truth. We open our hearts and we are one with the divine. It's just such a joyful thought. That's all we need to do is practice that. He finds it irresistible. He cannot turn his back on us. Yogananda says it 1,000 times. You know, we're reading this book, what's the name of that? How to Reach Your True Potential, as part of our Kriya Satsang groups, or our book club right now. And there's a whole chapter that we just read on prayer. But really, and they're just quotes of Yogananda. But they're not just, they're quotes about prayer, but they're quotes about what's the end result of prayer. So of course, it's all about how to contact God over and over and over in this tiny little chapter, but with utter clarity. Open your heart to me, and I will enter and take charge of your life. That's what he says, just over and over. And we have to come in out of this world of delusion. I read a book, I'll end with this. I read a book a couple of years ago now about the Lusitania, which you all know was a ship that was torpedoed by the Germans and drowned in World War I. And it was written by the man who was the captain of the Lusitania. It's a very interesting and compelling book for a lot of reasons. But the message that he kept driving home in the book was, he said, the worst fear, because people were asking him over and over about this experience. Obviously, he was one of the not all that many who survived. And he said, you know, I've lived through a lot. I've sailed. He had an enormous experience, years and years and years before he was allowed to take this trip. And he was known as a miracle man. He pulled everybody out of, they said, countless thousands of lives. Isn't that fascinating that he wound up on the Lusitania? But anyway, he said, the thing that any captain of any boat dreads, because it takes you out of a reality where you can find your way. This is what got me out into this, is fog. He said fog is the enemy because you have no idea where you are. You don't know if the next ship is 30 feet away or 300 yards away, or where you're going, or what's going to happen. You are just floating in a sea where you're lost. You're bereft in a certain way. And he said, your whole goal is to get out of the fog. And when I read that, and he went on to say, he said, it reminds me of a lot of spiritual lessons. He said, in the way that we should hold it, we can't stay in the fog. It's dangerous. We're risking a lot. And that's what's going on for us. We have been given this extraordinary opportunity of finding ourselves here. This life, in this moment, in this yuga, with this teacher and his direct disciple, these are gifts. We have to make the most use of it that we can. We have to keep looking for the light again and again. We need to keep saying. Really what we need to keep doing is chanting the mantra, Hang Sa. I was going to say something else, but that's what we need to keep doing. I am that. I am that. I am the divine. I am spirit under any and all circumstances. No matter how terrible we feel, we do not sit at our altar and tell God how terrible we are. We don't, no matter how much it wants to come out. know I am that until we move enough energy that God can come and we can feel his heart and we can know that forever we are one with him.
Well,